Hello, everyone. Welcome to chapter 210, the last episode of season 14 of The Last Thoughts of a Busy Mind. We are still doing the theme of Misunderstanding Iran, and this episode is called Iran Needs You. My drink today is again Coke Zero. Sorry, I know it's boring, but this time it comes in a can. Yes, lukewarm can of Coke Zero. Well, throughout this season, I've talked extensively about a lot of things I thought were misunderstandings that people outside of Iran had about Iran. I'm mostly talking about non Iranians, even though I've talked a lot about Iranian diaspora as well, and sometimes about Iranian locals, but that's because I believe there is a lot of misunderstanding about Iran, its history, its even geography. And I thought it would be a good idea to kind of talk about them and get them out of the way, if it were. Well, now we are reaching the end of that journey, and we need to discuss what to do. I'm going to separate this episode into three sections. First, I'm going to talk about what people outside of Iran, the broader general audience, can do. I'm going to talk about what the Iranian diaspora can do, and then what the Iranian locals, people living inside of Iran, can do. Now, this is my opinion, you know that, but if you've been listening to me this far, this is what I believe is the way forward. I'm not saying that this is what the right way is, it is what I think the right way is. There is, of course, going to be changes, there's, of course, going to be discussions, and I hope at the very least at the end of this season you have learned things about Iran, whether it's history, culture, issues, or anything like that you didn't know before. And now you can have a more informed opinion of my country and my people. But first, let me talk about the broader general audience, basically anyone who isn't Iranian. The biggest thing is, if you want to help Iranians, is to put pressure on your various government entities to stop interfering in the fucking region. One of the biggest problems with people outside of Iran is that they believe they know what's best for Iranians. And the truth is, you don't. You just don't. Nobody does but the people who live in that region. That is also the same for Iranians, by the way, and what we believe of our neighbors. If you keep interfering, you will make things worse, as I'm sure America might have learned by the fact that they gave birth to Taliban and Al-Qaeda themselves, and ISIS. Basically, any terror group that they think they're fighting, they're the father of. So stop interfering. The future of Iranians need to be done by Iranians. That is the simplest thing I can say. Now, that doesn't mean that outside pressure doesn't help, because it does. But where do you put that pressure is very important. Another thing that I believe is completely wrong and misunderstood is that if you put pressure on a public, they will topple the government. They will rise and do things to topple the government. Now, that is patently just untrue. It just doesn't make any sense. Why? Because if you put pressure on the public, they will not suddenly realize, oh yeah, we're going to topple the regime that has put in pressure on us, because they will be too busy dealing with the pressure to actually do something. So, yeah, if you want to help, you need to put pressure on the right places. First of all, talk to your local representatives. Tell them, get the fuck out of this region. Whether it is Israel, Palestine, or Iran. We are not the boogeyman, but at the same time, I understand, that, Iran has far-reaching networks of, things, and IRGC is doing all of these crazy things, and that is correct, and you need to put pressure on them. But on them, here's the thing. Life in Iran is getting exponentially worse. You know who doesn't feel that? The leadership. The so-called nebulous thing called Islamic Republic, which is the people at the top of the power. They easily can travel. They invest outside of Iran. IRGC easily does work outside of Iran because they have capital, and in this world that is more important than any human right violation. They easily invest, they easily have their own private bank accounts outside of Iran because the pressure is not on them. It's on the Iranian public, because of some nebulous idea that, if you put pressure on the people, they will topple the government. And again, when has that worked? Seriously. If that had worked, they wouldn't need to distribute money for coup d'etats. Putting sanction on a population does not help the population. Now you can't say we are doing that to punish the government, but the government isn't feeling it. I'm telling you, Sayyid Ali Khamenei is not feeling the brunt of all of these sanctions because he isn't subject to them. Yes, he himself might be like, you are not welcome in the United States, but I'm telling you, he pays enough. Trump will welcome him with open arms, and he does have the money to do that. He isn't feeling it. He himself, people in top of the power, people responsible for a lot of the things that people despise Iranians for, they are not feeling the brunt of all of these sanctions, all of this pressure, the fact that there aren't any links from people inside of Iran to the outside world, the fact that we are excluded from using a lot of services like Patreon, that literally has named us, if you're in Iran, you cannot even have an account. That is not helping. That just isolates us more, keep us more in the pockets of our leaders, and it's not helping. It hasn't helped anyone in the history of the world, and it's not going to start helping right now. So you want to put pressure? Put it on the capital of the Iranian leaders instead of accepting them. Make them pay, not all of us. Collective punishment never works. This is, again, another thing that I've talked about in this season, but I think it needs reiteration. The mental burden of being Iranian is twofold. We are, first of all, being used, abused, and discarded by our own government, to the point that every day we woke up with our lungs literally suffering because of the pollution in the air. This is our own government doing this to us. And at the same time, we look at the outside world, and the outside world happily waves us with the back of the hand and you're sanctioned. Why? Because your leaders are doing this thing, and as a result, you, the regular person, are also going to get hurt. While we know that they have the infrastructure in place to actually hurt the people they want. But it's easier and less costly and actually more advantageous to hurt everyone. Because the people who have the money can actually use it. So that is, if you are, and stop bombing. The other thing, stop bombing us. In the Iran-Israel war, one of the things I see is a lot of people, not just Iranian diaspora, the West, be like, what Israel is doing. People who believed Benjamin Netanyahu, who I believe are not just naive. At this point, it's just naivete. It is active malicious intent is that people who listen to Bibi Netanyahu were like, oh yeah, he is going to help them through these bombings to liberate themselves. And again, bombing us will not liberate us. It actually has the opposite effect. The thing that Iran International never understands is that when people are being bombed, they are not thinking of toppling the government, they are thinking of getting rid of the people who are bombing them. And that brings me to the Iranian diaspora. What can you do? Just stop. We are not going back to pre-1979. We shouldn't want to go back, but even if you are by some accord so adamant, we are not going back to pre-1979. We are not going back to Pahlavi. And the fact that you actively cheer the bombing of your own fellow citizens, of bombing of people you deem to be worthy of being bombed because of whatever political disagreement you have with them, shows a lot about your preferences. You're not thinking of a free Iran. You're thinking of an Iran for you, and if you're not getting it, fuck it, bomb it all. I'm sorry if that seems harsh, but that is the biggest thing about Iranian diaspora, especially the older ones. They're either monarchy or ruination. There is nothing in between for them. And the fact that they gleefully cheer for Netanyahu to bomb Iran, they gleefully cheer for people to lose their livelihood because they think if there is enough pressure, things will just blow up and things will be changed for good, shows an astonishingly amount of lack of self-awareness and genuinely fuck you. People being bombed, people being put under pressure, people losing their livelihood, losing their lives, they are not pawns in your political game of ultimately going back to pre-1979. Now, I'm not saying that everyone who is an Iranian diaspora, especially the older ones, is without merit. They're like, oh, they were prosecuted, they were hunted, they had to flee this country. I get that. But try to educate yourself. Do you want to do something? Talk to people inside of Iran who are not your relatives. Talk to people who might actually have something to say about what needs to be done. Instead of saying, oh, you do not follow Reza Pahlavi on X. You're a Islamic Republic apologist. You should die. The fact that this infighting is this apparent to them is, I don't know. It's depressing. And the fact that I have to tell this to other Iranians, to like, okay, you know what? When bombs fall on your fellow countrymen, don't cheer. The bombs aren't liberate. The fact that a lot of Iranian diaspora are exclusively right-wing is worrying. But again, most of them are stuck in 1979, and Shah of Iran was not progressive. There is a thing. Again, I'm going to bring it back because it's important. The Shah of Iran was not a progressive figure. He was far right, he was very traditionalist, he was patriarchal, and people who love that idea are not progressive. So a lot of Iranian diaspora are already right-wingers. They are already following in the footsteps of like the most alt-right ideals because they believe that for some reason the left is responsible for bringing the Islamic Republic, which I don't know how they see that, but it also comes from the fact that the left in Iran doesn't really have a definition. The fact that Jalal al-Ahmad and Samad Behrangi are both considered the left should tell you, I mean, if you're not from Iran, it doesn't tell you anything because you don't know who the fuck they are. But if you are Iranian and you consider both of them left, you are I'm going to say misinformed. I'm not going to say an idiot, because genuinely you might be misinformed. And I suggest you, first of all, read their works if you haven't. Less so Jalal, but you will realize that the only thing they have in common is that they both used written words. Otherwise, not very much. But okay. As I said, they were mostly already right-wingers, and the fact that they follow so heavily behind the idea that bombs are liberation is maddening. Oh, if we bomb enough people, enough of the right people, Iran will be liberated. And it won't. It will become a ruin. And lastly, to my fellow countrymen inside of Iran, people like me stuck here, breathing in dust and smog and feeling like things will never ever get better, the only thing I can tell you is that have hope, because things always seem hopeless. But there is one thing I've learned about reading Iranian history, is that things always seemed hopeless. And then change happened. When the constitutional revolution happened, things seemed hopeless. Felt like, oh, things will never get better. We were out of a 50-year-old reign of a king who was, for all accounts, not the best king and ruled with an iron fist. And things seemed hopeless, and then they changed. Then it felt like, oh, Iran is definitely not going to get any better with its cultural landscape. And then it changed. The Enlightened came and actually managed to do some stuff. Then it felt like, oh, the political pressure, the political pressure of, bowing down to the king will never change. And then that changed. And then it felt like Islamic Republic is impenetrable. And it changed. 2009 happened, 2019 happened, 2022 happened, woman life freedom happened, and it had tangible change. Tangible change that, because we feel so hopeless about it, they're starting to roll back. Because they can, because there is one thing about dictatorships, about authoritarianism. It doesn't feel fatigue that much. It will always keep doing the same thing. Because they are bound to traditionalism in Iran. And tradition is relentless. And it feels like hope is dying, because it is. As I'm talking to you right now, I have the smallest amount of hope that my life will become anything good. Genuinely. But at the same time, I know I can't let that, even that little sliver, die, because if I do, the traditionalism in Iran will prevail again, as it has many times before, because at the most important parts of history, the thing that fucked us is that we lost hope. When constitutional revolution happened and it failed, people lost hope. Malik al-Sharawi Bahar started writing songs about how somebody from out there should help us. When faced with the brutality of Islamic Republic, instead of asking for more, a lot of people just lost hope. They were afraid, and rightfully so, but they lost hope. They became isolated. They isolated themselves, and this shit happened. So the only thing I can tell you is that please don't lose hope. Things are dire. They might never get better, but we need to keep that hope. We need to still do something. And with that, this season comes to an end. In 3 weeks, we will have the special episode, and then in 6 weeks, we will have season 15. Now, whether or not season 15 will be the final season, I haven't decided yet. I'm not going to talk about that until season 15 starts. But until then, if you're an Iranian, keep hoping. If you're outside of Iran, stop interfering. Thank you and goodbye.